Hello and welcome to Convict Inc. I'm your host, Robert Rosso. And before I go any further, if you're one of the 4 or 5 people that saw the video posted under the same title within the last hour or two, I apologize. That video was not supposed to be posted. I posted the wrong one and deleted the right one. So I'm now going back and I'm redoing this. When I was in federal prison, I used to tell people, my friends, people I was just talking to, keep your story consistent. And what I was saying by that is, I don't care who you were on the street, who you're trying to be in federal prison, if you're trying to reinvent yourself, or if you're lying. I don't care if you lie all day. Just keep your story consistent. If I know that you're a stone cold liar in my heart, I'm cool with that. As long as you keep your stories consistent. That's it. That's all I've ever asked for. If not, it just tunes me out. All I see is blah, 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 blah. After that is once I catch you in a variation of your story. So that's just how I've always went by. This story is actually about a person who's been able to keep his story consistent for a long period of time. And that person is Joe Leisler. Joe Leisler is a man from Maryland who was serving time in federal prison under firearm charges and had a consecutive sentence run in the state of Maryland. Before I go down that path and talk about Joe, I have to talk about the Aryan Brotherhood, because in the backdrop of this story is the Aryan Brotherhood. Do any Google search and you'll see that the Aryan Brotherhood has 15 to 20,000 alleged members. Now, when somebody reads that, what's it make you think? It makes you think that the AB is one monolithic gang, one gang that has all these members that are connected to the same gang and they're all part of this one organization. That's not true. There's nothing could be farther from the truth. There are many different factions of the Aryan Brotherhood and none are related to one another. The only ones that are closely aligned or now loosely aligned is the California Aryan Brotherhood, which was the original Aryan Brotherhood, and the Federal Aryan Brotherhood, aka the brand. So, the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas has nothing to do with the Aryan Brotherhood of Oklahoma, which has nothing to do with the Universal Aryan Brotherhood, which has nothing to do with the California Aryan Brotherhood, which has nothing to do with the Aryan Brotherhood or the brand in the federal system. None of them are aligned with each other except for the California and the feds, and they are loosely aligned. The Aryan Brotherhood began in the in the mid-60s in the California Department of Corrections. There's conflicting stories about this, but the one that is true to the best of my knowledge, and that's from talking to people in California, I am from there, is that the Aryan Brotherhood originated out of San Quentin. They were formed to counter the persecution of whites by the Black Guerrilla family and the Emmy. The Aryan Brotherhood in those days was actually needed. And the original members were guys reportedly of different gangs, the Diamond Tooth Gang and the Bluebirds. Some say they were Irish gangs, some say they were biker gangs. Whatever the case, that's what's being reported. In the 1970s, in the California Department of Corrections, at this time, there was no any other Aryan Brotherhood gangs in any other prison systems that I know of or that has been reported. That is, in the 70s, they were still just in California Department of Corrections. The whites in that system, or the Aryan Brotherhood in the California Department of Corrections, were seen as protectors of the whites. Whites were happy to see him. I wasn't there, but I know people who were. And they were seen as protectors of the white race. Again, the gang was formed because of the abuse whites were taken as a minority group inside prison. And some say that the Aryan Brotherhood was needed. In the 80s, however, things changed. No longer were they seen as just the protectors, but now they began to become seen as predators. That is, they were predatoring or abusing other whites. When you get a bunch of numbers, you get some of the wrong guys, you start patching up for the wrong reasons. Guys start preying on their own. That's just how it is. Now, again, I was not in the CDC during the 80s. These are just stories from what I've been told. Also in the 80s, you had groups pop up like the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas, which again had nothing to do with the California ABs. You had the Ohio ABs, I think started in the late 80s. I'm not sure, if not early 90s. You had Arizona ABs, and of course, you had the Federal Aryan Brotherhood. Now, the Federal Aryan Brotherhood, the members that went into the feds were original ABs. That is, they were all from the California Department of Corrections. They got patched up while serving time in the CDC, and then they got out and got busted and went into the federal system. T.D. Bingham, Barry Mills, Tommy Silverstein. These are some of the early names or the early founders of the federal branch of the Aryan Brotherhood. At first, they were more closely aligned with their California brethren. The California crew had what's called as a council, which were their governing body. The feds would later have what's known now and is today as the commission. Today, they aren't as aligned as they once were in the early days. In the 80s, in the federal system, the Aryan Brotherhood was having problems with the DC blacks, or the DC N-words was the actual name. This wasn't a name that the whites used. This was a name that the black gangs called them, and the DC blacks referred to themselves. But it is now the DC blacks, and that's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to refer to them. Most of the DC blacks were Muslim. They began having conflict with the Aryan Brotherhood, and it was a tit for tat. In different prisons over the 80s and the 90s, you'd have an AB kill a black, a DC black, and DC black retaliate, kill an AB, and so forth. In 1997, United States Penitentiary in Lewisburg, or USP Lewisburg, the Aryan Brotherhood there and their associates / foot soldiers got orders from the commission that they were to move on the DC Muslims. So the orders were basically kill or attack or assault anybody from DC who was a Muslim. That's what the orders were. Among those who got the orders were members of the Aryan Brotherhood, some prospects, and I believe that there was a couple other another white prison gang involved who I will not mention. But one of the people that were involved that wasn't a gang member but was affiliated with the Aryan Brotherhood was Joe Leisler. Now, when all hell broke loose and the assaults took place and murders did happen, Joe was nowhere to be found. In fact, he skated out. He was given an order. He said he was going to go, and he did not go. From Lewisburg, he was transferred to USP Beaumont down in Texas. And what happened to Joe at Texas, I'm not really sure. But after 1998, he ended up at USP Leavenworth, where I met Joe. Now, me and Joe were not friends. We knew each other. I knew him. He knew me. We did not hang out with one another. Joe befriended members of the Aryan Resistance Militia, or ARMS, or Aryan Resistance Movement. I'm sorry, my bad, but of the ARMS. Tony Adams, RV, Speed, those are some of the guys that were there at the time. And it was brought to their attention that Joe was one of the guys who cowered out, ran, dodged wreck at Lewisburg. It was brought to their attention that the brand had he had volunteered to go on a mission for the brand, and he didn't go. There was also some other issues which I'm not privy to at this time, but I will in the near future because I'm writing a piece about this. Once Joe got into it with the ARMS, it was in the chow hall. A guy named Tony Adams, an RV, jumped on him in the chow hall. He was locked up in special housing unit, or the SHU, and ultimately transferred to ADX in Florence, Colorado. Now, the ADX is known as America's most secure prison, houses the worst of the worst, and among them are the upper echelons of the leaders of the Aryan Brotherhood at the time. That is T.D. Bingham and Barry Mills. There were also others, I'm not sure, but those two were there. It is my understanding from at least one source that Joe Leisler was sent into the protective custody wing in the ADX. Now, I don't know that for sure. Usually 3 sources is what I go for. I've got one source that says that Joe was there. Nevertheless, if Joe wasn't in the PC wing, had he been in any other of the general population pods or sections, he could have been a target for the Aryan Brotherhood. Again, he did not go on a mission, so he was in what's called the hat, or he was greenlit. The ABs wanted Joe because he ran. He said he didn't do what he said he was going to do. And as a result, some people could have gotten hurt or did get hurt. I'm not sure. So I don't want to make up stories about that. From the federal system, so again, Joe had firearms. He was serving 10 years for firearms violation in the federal system, run concurrent with a life sentence in the state of Maryland. The life sentence was a result of a murder. Joe and 3 co-defendants went into somebody's house, robbed the guy, tied him up, starved him to death, and over a period of weeks, drained the guy's bank account. I'm not sure if there was if they stabbed him as well, but he was starved to death, tied to a chair. They did some really gruesome stuff, talked about how they're going to dispose of the body and how they're going to kill him, the victim and all that stuff. So anyway, from ADX, Joe ends up in the Maryland Department of Corrections and starts his own Aryan Brotherhood gang. Now, let me back up, rewind. Joe Leisler, who started his time in the feds, who volunteered and or agreed to go on a mission for the Aryan Brotherhood, and had he done so, could have become a member of the Aryan Brotherhood like that at the time, went to got himself in a jam, ABs had a target on him, greenlit him, put him in the hat, goes to Maryland, and not only starts his own AB gang, but from one source who was there, went and told people that he was sanctioned to start the ABs by the founders, by the guys in the feds, or by the guys in California. Again, California ABs and the ones in the feds have an alliance. They have a loose alliance nowadays. They're not one and the same. Joe Leisler went to Maryland and falsely claimed that he was given the authority to start an Aryan Brotherhood gang. Whatever the case, he got a lot of guys to join. So I believe the count that I'm reading is about 40 members in all of the Maryland Aryan Brotherhood. Recently, in November, Joe was sentenced to multiple life sentences because he gave the orders to other members of the Aryan Brotherhood to kill at least one rival white gang member. Now, I want everybody to stop and think about that. Stop. A guy who created his own prison gang under false premise. He came there and told these guys that he was sanctioned by the brand to start it. Who ducked rec, that's what we call it in the feds. Duck rec means you don't go on your mission, you don't do as you were said. You were supposed to go in the yard and do something and commit an assault, but you backed out. You were in the shower. You said you got caught in the unit. That's called ducking rec. Joe Leisler ducked rec, ignored an order, and then went and started his own AB gang and gave orders. And some of these orders included murder. He was calling the shots and having guys killed. And the final authority was Joe. It wasn't a commission-style AB faction. This was all Joe's final decision. And let me tell you what, Big Joe, when he went to the Maryland system, he's also known as Big Joe or Nazi Joe. This is what Nazi Joe had to say about the ABs, which is very important, by the way. Aryan Brotherhood uses race and means of psychological intimidation to make other inmates fear them, Leisler said. So, in other words, Joe's saying, oh, exactly, I'm not a racist. I have best friends that are black in prison on the street. He also said he had a Jewish fiance and black family members. Now, why is that important? The Southern Poverty Law Center a lot of times likes to say that the Aryan Brotherhood is a white supremacy gang. Although Leisler started his tip or his Aryan Brotherhood gang under false premises, he, like the rest of the ABs, really they're not a white supremacy gang like they've been led to believe. in the news, in the movies, in books, it's always the ABs are a white supremacy gang when really none of them have that ideology. There might be members that believe that. There might be members who praise Hitler or have racist beliefs and ideology, but that's not part of their bylaws. It's not part of their creed. That's all made up. And Leisler spelled it out there pretty quick. I mean, pretty good too, you know. So he also said on the stand that what was the big one? I'm sorry, my bad. He also said on the stand that once you're a full member, there's no way out. You had to be killed. Now, again, you got a guy who came in there under false premise who was delusional. A guy who, again, and also goes on to quote and say his life work was being ruined because other members of the AB, in particular, the second in command, testified against him. He shouted, he was angry. He was angry and said that they destroyed his life, were trying to destroy his life's work, meaning his life's work was to be the shot caller of the Aryan Brotherhood, to preserve the white race or whatever kind of BS they were putting down at the time. And he had all these guys under him. If you are a member of the Maryland Aryan Brotherhoods, I mean no disrespect to you, none whatsoever. But this is a good lesson for people who are trying to join gangs or who are not yet in prison and may join a gang in the future, to always find out who your founders are. Who are the guys that you're going to risk your life for? Who are the guys that are going to call the shots for you to kill somebody and you're going to follow them? Members of the ABs of Maryland followed a guy that was in the hat by the Aryan Brotherhood. I mean, that's insane. I'm not saying there's not a bunch of good guys that are patched up AB of Maryland. There might be. I don't know any, and I'm sure in every gang there are some really good guys that join for whatever reason. If you are an AB of Maryland AB, I'm sorry, and you go into the federal prison system, you might have some problems. Because like me, there's also guys in the feds that know Joe Leisler. They know what happened. They know what went down. You know, stories like that, they continue. They just don't die. You'll hear stories from the 50s and 60s in the feds. And Leisler's one of those names that rings because of that he ducked red, because that he disobeyed an order by the Aryan Brotherhood, an order that he said he would do, that he gladly took, proudly took, as a matter of fact. So it might be true that if you are patched up AB out of Maryland, that if you go into the feds, that you might have problems because they're not going to recognize your gang. I've seen this happen with somebody else. I'm not going to get there, go there. I'm sorry, but it's some problems. So I don't know the state of what's going to happen. It's not my thing. The only thing I want to make clear, because I have personal firsthand knowledge of this, is the founder of the Maryland Aryan Brotherhood is not legit. That's not what happened. He came and lied to all of his people, and all these guys now have patches based on this lie. That's kind of a shame, especially for the guys that are doing life sentences in there that did the hits under Joe's command. The guys who followed his orders went ahead and killed people because Joe gave the order. Joe didn't kill nobody for the order that he was given, but he ordered some guys to kill him. That's what happened. It just seems like kind of a shame. Again, no disrespect to anybody. I don't disrespect anybody. I don't care if you're independent. I don't care if you're what gang you're in. As long as you do your time like a man in prison and you respect me, I give everybody respect in the world. That's how I always felt. And I don't mean any disrespect here. I just heads up for the guys out of Maryland who are patched up brand. Hopefully you guys can all work that out. And again, for all those of you going to go to prison and might join a gang, find out who your founders are. Find out who you're representing. Find out what you're representing. that creed, code, bylaws that you got put down, make sure it's followed. Because there's a lot of good bylaws that should be followed that guys don't follow, and things fall apart. It's just an opinion. One man's opinion. Have a nice night.